Captain Day-Ho stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars disappear one by one. The view screen showed empty space where Altair Colony used to be. 3 million people had lived there just hours ago. Now there was nothing but floating, metal and ice. "Sir, we're picking up the distress signals," said So-Min from her station. Her voice was quiet, like she was afraid to speak too loud. "The emergency beacons are still transmitting." Day-Ho closed his eyes. Those beacons meant people were still alive somewhere in the wreckage, people trapped in broken ships, calling for help that would never come. The rescue ships had already turned back. They said it was too dangerous to get close. "How many ships did we lose?" Day-Ho asked. 14, So-Min replied. "The defense fleet tried to fight, but—" She stopped talking and looked down at her hands. Day-Ho knew what she meant. The defense fleet had been destroyed in minutes, not damaged, not defeated, completely destroyed. Their ships had been torn, apart like paper, and then something worse had happened. The wreckage had started moving, twisting into new shapes, like it was still alive. "Show me the recordings again," Day-Ho said. So-Min's fingers moved over her controls. The main screen lit up with the footage from the battle. At first, everything looked normal. The Altair defense fleet had formed a protective line around the colony. 12 heavy cruisers and 30 fighters, all ready to defend their home. Then it appeared. The ship was massive, bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was black and gray, with a surface that seemed to move like liquid metal. Strange lights pulsed along its hull, and wherever those lights touched, space itself seemed to bend and twist. The ship looked wrong, like it didn't belong in normal space. "Computer, identify the vessel," Day-Ho said. "Vessel unknown," the computer replied. "Hull composition unknown, energy signature unknown, classification unknown." But Day-Ho knew what it was. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Void Reaper, even if most people thought it was just a story. The Kethran Empire's ultimate weapon. A ship that didn't just destroy worlds, but consumed them, feeding on the fear and pain of dying civilizations. On the screen, the battle began. The human ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up space with bright beams of energy. The shots hit the alien ship and simply disappeared, absorbed by its dark hull like water soaking into sand. The Void Reaper didn't even slow down. Then, it fired back. Long, writhing tentacles of dark energy reached out from the alien ship. When they touched the human vessels, something terrible happened. The ships didn't explode. Instead, they began to change. Their metal hulls started growing, spreading, taking on the same liquid appearance as the enemy ship. Day-Ho could hear the screams coming through the radio channels as the crews were absorbed into their own vessels. "Turn it off," Day-Ho said, quietly. So-Min stopped the recording. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the engines. Everyone knew what came next in the footage. The alien ship had moved to the colony itself, and then 3 million people had simply stopped existing. "Sir," said Taemin from the communications station, "we're getting a transmission from the Galactic Council. Emergency session." Day-Ho nodded. "Put it through." The screen changed to show the council chambers. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their floating chairs, all talking at once. Their translator boxes were working overtime, filling the air with a dozen different languages, all expressing the same thing: fear. Council leader Zephron, a tall blue being with 4 arms, finally managed to restore order. "The situation is clear," he said. "The Kethran vessel known as the Void Reaper has destroyed the Altair system. Our intelligence suggests it is moving toward the Proxima sector. Next." A representative from the Rigelian Republic stood up. "We must evacuate immediately. This ship cannot be stopped by conventional weapons." "What about unconventional weapons?" asked someone else. "Surely we have something that can damage it." "Negative," replied a military advisor. "We've analyzed the recordings from Altair. The ship's defenses are unlike anything we've encountered. It doesn't just resist damage, it absorbs it. Every weapon we fire at it only makes it stronger." Day-Ho leaned forward in his chair. "What about its commander? Do we know anything about the being controlling it?" The council chamber fell quiet. Finally, Zephron spoke. "According to our files, the ship is commanded by Admiral Vexitar of the Kethran Empire, but calling him a being may not be accurate anymore. Our intelligence suggests he has been merged with the ship for over 300 years. Merged how? Deho asked. We don't know, but survivors from previous attacks report hearing his voice coming from the ship itself, as if the vessel has become his body. Another representative stood up. This is pointless discussion. We cannot fight this thing. We must begin immediate evacuation of the Proxima, Centauri, and Vega sectors. At least 50 billion beings must be relocated. And go where? Demanded someone else. How do we evacuate 50 billion people? And what happens when this ship decides to chase them? The argument continued for another hour. Plans were made for massive evacuation fleets. Emergency shelters were discussed. Supply lines were calculated. But Deho could see the truth in everyone's faces. They were giving up. They were accepting that the Void Reaper couldn't be stopped. Finally, Deho stood up. I volunteer for a reconnaissance mission. The chamber fell silent again. Zephron stared at him through the screen. Captain Deho, reconnaissance of what? The ship is too dangerous to approach. Someone needs to get close to it, Deho said. We need to understand how it works, find its weaknesses. There are no weaknesses, said the military advisor. Captain, this isn't bravery, it's suicide. Maybe, Deho replied. But sitting here making evacuation plans isn't going to save anyone. That ship destroyed Altair in 3 hours. How long do you think it will take to destroy Proxima? Or Earth? So Min looked up at him from her station. Her eyes were wide with worry. Sir, the Council is right. It's too dangerous. Deho smiled at her. Everything we do out here is dangerous, So-Min, but this is different. This isn't just about one ship or one battle. If we let this thing continue, it will consume the entire galaxy. Council Leader Zephron was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What exactly are you proposing, Captain? Give me a fast ship and a small crew, Deho said. Let me get close to the Void Reaper during its next attack. Maybe I can find something, some weakness we've missed. And if you can't? Deho looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his answer. These people had followed him through a dozen battles. They trusted him to make the right choices, but this time he wasn't sure what the right choice was. Then at least we'll know we tried, he said finally. The council voted. Most representatives voted against the mission, but enough voted in favor to authorize it. Deho was given command of a fast scout ship called the Whisper. His crew volunteered to go with him, even though everyone knew they probably wouldn't come back. As they prepared to leave, So-Min approached him in his quarters. Sir, are you sure about this? Deho looked out the small window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Void Reaper was moving toward its next target. In a few days, another world would die, and another few million people would scream into the darkness before being consumed. No, he said honestly. I'm not sure about anything, but I keep hearing those distress signals from Altair. Those people called for help, and nobody came. Maybe we can't save them, but we can try to make sure it doesn't happen again. So Min nodded. Then we'll follow you, sir. All of us. 2 days later, the Whisper launched from the council station. Their destination was the Proxima sector, where long-range sensors had detected the Void Reaper's approach. They had maybe 48 hours before the next attack began. As they traveled through hyperspace, Deho couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a terrible mistake. But every time he thought about turning back, he remembered the empty space where Altair used to be. 3 million people had died there, and their killer was still free. Someone had to try to stop it. Even if that someone was just one human captain with a small ship and a desperate plan. The Proxima defense platform was huge, almost as big as a small moon. Thousands of people lived and worked there, protecting the shipping lanes that connected dozens of star systems. Deho watched it through the Whisper's sensors as they approached. In 12 hours, all those people would be dead. Are you picking up the Void Reaper yet? Deho asked Taimin. Negative, sir, but our long-range sensors show a distortion moving this way. Whatever that ship does to space, we can detect it even when we can't see the ship itself. So-Min looked up from her station. Sir, I'm reading a Catherine shuttle on the edge of the system. It looks damaged. Deho felt his heart speed up. This was the chance he had been hoping for. Life signs? Negative. The shuttle appears to be dead in space. Take us to it, Deho ordered. But carefully. It could be a trap. They approached the alien shuttle slowly. It was small, built for maybe 6 people, with the same dark metal surface as the Void Reaper. But this one wasn't moving or pulsing with strange lights. It looked truly dead. "I'm taking a team aboard," Daeho announced. "Sir, that's not safe," Somin protested. "We don't know anything about Kethran technology." "That's exactly why I need to see it," Daeho replied. "If I'm going to get aboard the Void Reaper, I need to understand how their ships work." The shuttle's airlock was damaged, but still functional. Daeho and 2 security officers, Wu Sung and Hai Jin, entered the alien vessel wearing full environmental suits. The interior was dark and cold, lit only by their helmet lights. The shuttle was definitely built for a different species. Everything was too tall, and there were strange grooves in the walls that might have been handholds for beings with different hands than humans. But what caught Daeho's attention was the pilot's station. "Look at this," he said, pointing his light at the control panel. "These aren't physical controls. Everything is organic." Where human ships had buttons and screens, the Kethran shuttle had what looked like living tissue. Dark, vein-like structures ran through the walls, all connected to a central mass behind the pilot's seat. When Daeho touched one of the veins, it was warm. "The whole ship is alive," Wu Sung said quietly. Or it was, anyway. Heijin was examining something near the back of the shuttle. "Sir, you need to see this." Daeho moved to where Heijin was standing. There was a small chamber filled with what looked like technological equipment, but it was all organic like the rest of the ship. In the center was a helmet made of the same dark material. "I think this is how they interface with their ships," Heijin said. "The pilot puts this on, and it connects them directly to the vessel's nervous system." Daeho picked up the helmet. It was heavier than it looked, and the inside was lined with thousands of tiny tendrils. "This is it," he said. "This is how I get aboard the Void Reaper." "Sir?" Somin's voice came through his communicator. "The distortion is getting stronger. I think the Void Reaper will be here in about 6 hours." Daeho made his decision quickly. "We're taking this shuttle with us. Attach a tow cable." Back aboard the Whisper, Daeho explained his plan to the crew. "The shuttle's biological systems are dead, but our engineers think they can restart them. If I can get the ship functioning and wear that helmet, I should be able to disguise myself as a Kethran." "Sir, that's insane," Somin said. "What if the helmet does something to your brain?" "Then you'll have to complete the mission without me," Daeho replied. "But this is our only chance. Once the Void Reaper starts attacking the platform, it will be focused on the battle. I can use the confusion to get close." Chief Engineer Min Ho had been working on the shuttle for hours. When he returned to the Whisper, he looked exhausted. "I got the basic systems working," he reported. "The life support is functional and the engines will run. But sir, that helmet, when I activated it, I could feel something trying to get into my mind." "What kind of something?" Daeho asked. "I don't know how to describe it. Like whispers that weren't quite words. It only lasted a few seconds before I pulled the helmet off. But," Minho shuddered. "Sir, that thing isn't just a control interface. It's designed to connect the pilot's mind to the ship. If you wear it too long, you might not be able to take it off." Daeho nodded. "How long is too long?" "I don't know. Maybe an hour? Maybe less?" "That should be enough time," Daeho said. "I just need to get aboard the Void Reaper and find something we can use against it." 4 hours later, the space around Proxima Station erupted into chaos. The Void Reaper emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. It was even bigger than the recordings had shown, and the dark energy pulsing through its hull made the stars around it dim and flicker. The station's defense fleet moved to intercept it. 30 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers, formed a battle line. Their weapons opened fire immediately, filling space with bright energy beams. Just like at Altair, the shots simply disappeared when they hit the alien ship. "Beginning approach," Daeho said into his communicator. He was alone in the Kethran shuttle wearing the organic helmet. The moment he had put it on, he had felt something cold and alien touch his thoughts. But he had pushed the sensation away and focused on his mission. The shuttle's controls responded to his thoughts now instead of his hands. It was disturbing but useful. He could fly the ship just by thinking about where he wanted to go. As he approached the battle, the Void Reaper began its attack. The same dark tentacles of energy reached out from its hull. But this time, Daeho was close enough to see what they really were. They weren't weapons in any normal sense. They were some kind of living conduits that connected the enemy ship to its targets. When a tentacle touched one of the human cruisers, Daeho watched the ship begin to change. Its hull started growing, sprouting new sections that looked more like the Void Reaper. But worse than that, he could hear screaming through the shuttle's communication system. The crew was still alive inside their transforming ship, and they were in agony. "Focus," Daeho told himself. "You can't help them now." He guided the shuttle toward one of the Void Reaper's docking bays. The alien ship had dozens of them, designed for vessels much larger than his stolen shuttle. As he approached, he felt something probe his mind through the helmet. For a moment, he was terrified that he had been discovered. But the probe passed over him without stopping. Whatever was scanning him, it recognized the shuttle as belonging to the Kethran Empire. The docking bay opened, and mechanical arms reached out to guide him inside. The moment the shuttle touched down, Daeho felt the helmet's grip on his mind grow stronger. The whispers became clearer, though he still couldn't understand what they were saying. He had to get off this ship quickly, before the alien technology made him into something that wasn't human anymore. The docking bay was enormous, filled with other shuttles and small ships. Some of them looked Kethran, but others were clearly from different species. Captured vessels, probably taken from previous battles. The thought made Daeho's stomach turn. He left the shuttle and began walking toward what he hoped was the interior of the ship. The corridors were dark and warm, with the same living metal walls he had seen in the shuttle. But here, the walls were moving more actively, pulsing with visible currents of energy. As he walked, Daeho began to hear something that made his blood run cold. Voices, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all speaking at once. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, a constant murmur of words in languages he didn't recognize. He followed the main corridor deeper into the ship. The voices grew louder as he walked, and he began to make out individual words. Pleas, for help. Cries of pain, names being called out in desperation. "Help me," said a voice that sounded human. "Please, someone help me." Daeho stopped walking. The voice was coming from a section of wall that looked different from the rest. Instead of smooth metal, this part of the corridor was covered in what looked like organic pods, each one about the size of a person. He approached one of the pods carefully. It was translucent, and inside he could see the shape of a human body floating in some kind of liquid. The person inside was alive, their eyes moving frantically, their mouth opening and closing as if they were trying to speak. "Oh no," Daeho whispered. "What have they done to you?" He touched the surface of the pod, and suddenly he could hear the person inside clearly. It was a young man, maybe 20 years old. "Please," the man said. "I'm Wu Jin. I was an engineer on Kepler Station. They took me 3 months ago. I can't move, I can't die, I can only think and feel and remember. Please, you have to help me." Daeho looked around the corridor and realized that every pod contained a person. Humans, aliens, beings from dozens of different species, all trapped in the ship's organic matrix. They were alive but helpless, conscious but unable to act. "How many of you are there?" Daeho asked. "Thousands," Wu Jin replied. "Maybe millions. Everyone who ever fought this ship. We're all here, trapped forever. The ship feeds on our fear and pain. That's how it powers itself." Daeho felt sick. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a prison designed to torture its victims for eternity. Every person who had ever stood against the Kethran Empire was here, suffering endlessly to fuel their enemy's power. "I'm going to find a way to stop this," Daeho promised. "You can't," Wu Jin said. "No one can. The ship's commander, Vextar, he's become part of the vessel. He controls everything, and he's—" Daeho barely made it back to the whisper before the alien helmet's influence became too strong. The moment he pulled it off his head, he collapsed on the shuttle floor, gasping for air. So-Min found him there 20 minutes later, shaking and covered in sweat. "Sir, what happened?" she asked, helping him to his feet. "The ship," Daeho said, his voice hoarse. "It's not what we thought. It's full of people, living people, trapped inside it." Back on the Whisper's bridge, Daeho told his crew what he had discovered. The silence that followed his report was heavy with horror and disbelief. You're saying the ship keeps its victims alive? So-Min asked. For what purpose? To feed on them, Deho replied. Their fear, their pain, their life energy, that's what powers the ship. Every person who ever fought against it is still inside, conscious and suffering. Taemin looked up from his station. Sir, that's impossible. Some of those battles happened decades ago. People can't live that long in those conditions. They can if the ship won't let them die, Deho said grimly. I spoke to one of them, a young engineer named Wu Jin. He's been trapped for 3 months, unable to move, unable to die. The bridge fell quiet again. Finally, So-Min spoke. What do we do now? Deho stood up and walked to the view screen. The Void Reaper was already gone, moving on to its next target. In a few days, it would destroy another world, and millions more people would join the chorus of trapped souls inside its hull. We go back, Deho said. Sir? So-Min's voice was shocked. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Wu Jin said the trapped people have been trying to organize, to resist from inside the ship's systems. If I can help them coordinate their efforts, maybe we can find a way to turn the ship's own power against it. Chief Engineer Minho stepped forward. Captain, I've been analyzing the data from your helmet while you were unconscious. That thing didn't just connect you to the ship's controls. It was trying to integrate your mind into the ship's collective consciousness. If you use it again, you might not come back as yourself. How long do I have? Deho asked. Minho hesitated. Based on the neural activity I recorded, maybe 30 minutes before the integration becomes permanent. And that's if you're lucky. 30 minutes, Deho repeated. That should be enough. Enough for what? So-Min demanded. Sir, this is suicide. Even if you can help those people organize, what can they do? They're trapped in pods, helpless. Their minds aren't helpless, Deho replied. If they're connected to the ship's systems, they might be able to access its controls, sabotage it from within. Over the next 2 days, Deho and his crew tracked the Void Reaper to its next target, the Centauri Mining Collective. It was a small operation, only about 50,000 people, but it controlled the asteroid belt that supplied rare metals to half the galaxy. The attack followed the same pattern as before. The human defense ships tried to fight and were absorbed into the Void Reaper's growing mass. The mining stations were destroyed, their populations consumed. Deho watched it all happen through long-range sensors, forcing himself to memorize every detail. I count at least 40 new victims, So-Min reported. The ship's hull has grown larger to accommodate them. Deho nodded. That means 40 new potential allies inside the ship. Are you ready to take us in? Sir, please reconsider, So-Min said. There has to be another way. There isn't, Deho replied. Every day we wait, more people die, and every new victim makes the ship stronger. This time, Deho's approach was different. Instead of using the Catherine shuttle, he took a small maintenance pod designed to look like debris. The Void Reaper's sensors ignored it as it drifted toward one of the ship's waste ports. Getting inside was harder without the shuttle's biological systems to fool the ship's defenses. Deho had to cut through several layers of organic armor with a plasma torch, trying to be quiet enough to avoid detection. The work was slow and dangerous, and twice he nearly triggered security systems that would have exposed him. Finally, he made it into one of the ship's lower levels. This section was different from the main corridors he had seen before. Instead of pods containing individual prisoners, this area was filled with massive organic computers. Each one was the size of a small building, with thousands of neural connections running between them. Hello? Deho whispered. Is anyone here? We're all here, said a familiar voice. It was Wu Jin, but this time his voice seemed to come from the walls themselves. Welcome back, Captain. How are you able to speak to me? We've learned to use the ship's communication systems, Wu Jin explained. It took months of practice, but some of us can project our consciousness through the neural network. There are others here who want to meet you. The air in front of Deho shimmered, and suddenly he could see translucent figures standing around him. They looked like ghosts, but he could see their faces clearly. Dozens of them, representing different species from across the galaxy. I am Hee-Jin, said one of them, a woman who looked Korean like himself. I was a xenobiologist on New Terra. I've been studying this ship from the inside for 8 months. I am KL Thon, said another figure, this one tall and blue with 4 arms. I was a quantum physicist before they took me. I have been analyzing the ship's power systems. A third figure stepped forward. This one was massive, with gray skin and ridge-like features. I am Mordun, formerly a military strategist for the Centauri Empire. I have been observing the ship's tactical capabilities. Deho looked around at all the ghostly figures. How many of you are there? In this section alone, about 3,000. Hyejin replied. But throughout the entire ship, we estimate close to 2 million souls are trapped here. People from hundreds of worlds, captured over 3 centuries of war. 2 million, Deho whispered. The number was almost too large to comprehend. The ship's commander, Vextar, feeds on our collective suffering, Kael'thon explained. But he made a mistake when he created this system. By connecting all our minds through the neural network, he gave us the ability to communicate and coordinate. Morden's ghost stepped closer to Deho. We have been planning a rebellion, but we needed someone from outside to help us. Someone who could move freely through the ship. What kind of rebellion? Deho asked. Hyejin gestured to the massive organic computers around them. These systems control the ship's basic functions: life support, gravity, structural integrity. If we can gain access to the central control nodes, we might be able to turn the ship's power against itself. But there's a problem, Wu Jin added. Vextar's consciousness is spread throughout the ship, but his core self is located in the central chamber. He would detect any major system changes and stop us before we could complete the sabotage. Unless, Kael'thon said slowly, we could distract him somehow. Keep his attention focused elsewhere while we work. Deho understood immediately. You want me to confront him directly? It's the only way, Mordun confirmed. If you can keep him focused on fighting you, we might have enough time to overload the ship's core systems. And if I can't defeat him? The ghostly figures exchanged glances. Finally, Hyejin spoke. Then we all die together. But at least we'll die fighting instead of suffering forever. Deho thought about the millions of people trapped in this floating prison. He thought about So-Min and his crew waiting for him to return. He thought about all the worlds that would be destroyed if the Void Reaper continued its rampage across the galaxy. Tell me what you need me to do, he said. For the next hour, the trapped souls explained their plan. The ship's central chamber contained Vextar's original consciousness, as well as the primary control systems for the entire vessel. If they could overload those systems while Vextar was distracted, the ship might destroy itself from within. The central chamber is heavily protected, Morden warned. You'll have to fight your way through dozens of biomechanical guardians. And once you reach Vextar himself, he'll have the advantage of fighting on his own ship. What about you? Deho asked. How will you access the control systems? We've been secretly building connections to the main network, Hyejin explained. It's taken months, but we've managed to create pathways that Vextar doesn't know about. When you distract him, we'll use those pathways to overload the ship's core. How long will you need? 10 minutes, Kael'thon said. Maybe 15 if the security systems fight back harder than expected. Deho nodded. Then that's how long I'll keep him busy? As he prepared to leave for the central chamber, Wu Jin called out to him. Captain, there's something else you should know. The process we're planning, it won't just destroy the ship. It will also free all the trapped souls. We'll finally be able to die. Is that what you want? Deho asked. More than anything, Wu Jin replied. We've been prisoners here for so long. Death would be a mercy. Deho looked around at all the ghostly figures. These people had been soldiers, scientists, engineers, ordinary citizens who had stood up to evil and paid the ultimate price. They deserved better than endless suffering. Then I'll make sure you get that mercy, he promised. As he walked away from the organic computers, heading toward the ship's central chamber, Deho could hear the voices of 2 million souls whispering their thanks. For the first time in centuries, they had hope. The corridor leading to the central chamber was different from the rest of the ship. The deeper Deho went into the ship, the more guardians he faced. Each one was different, like the ship was testing him with various forms of death. Some had claws that could cut through metal. Others fired beams of energy that burned through his protective suit. All of them were fast, strong, and completely without mercy. But Deho had advantages they didn't expect. His human reflexes were different from the alien species the ship was used to fighting. His tactics were unpredictable. Most importantly, he was fighting for something the Guardians couldn't understand: the freedom of others. After destroying his seventh Guardian, Deho paused to catch his breath. His suit was damaged in 3 places, and his left arm was bleeding from a deep cut. But he could feel something changing in the ship around him. The walls were pulsing faster, and the red symbols were glowing brighter. "He knows you're coming," said a voice in his head. It was Hyejin, speaking through the ship's neural network. "Vextar is starting to focus his attention on you." "Good," Deho replied quietly. "How's the sabotage going?" "We've accessed 15% of the control systems so far," Woojin's voice answered. "But the ship's security is fighting back." "We need more time." "You'll get it," Deho promised. The corridor ahead of him split into 3 paths. Each one was guarded by larger, more dangerous-looking creatures. These weren't just guardians, they were champions, beings that had been enhanced by the ship's technology until they were living weapons. Deho chose the middle path, reasoning that it would be the most direct route to the central chamber. The champion waiting for him was enormous, at least 3 meters tall, with skin that looked like living metal. When it moved, sparks of electricity danced between its fingers. The fight lasted almost 10 minutes. The champion was stronger and faster than anything Deho had faced before, but it was also overconfident. It had been designed to fight large groups of enemies, not a single human who could dodge between its attacks and strike at weak points. When the champion finally fell, Deho was exhausted. His entire body ached, and his suit's life support system was making warning sounds. But ahead of him, he could see the entrance to the central chamber. The doors were massive, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. As Deho approached they began to open on their own, revealing a chamber so large he couldn't see the far wall. The ceiling was lost in darkness, and the air glowed with shifting patterns of red and purple light. In the center of the chamber stood something that might once have been a living being. Vextar was 3 times the size of a human, but his body was no longer entirely organic. Cables and tubes ran from his spine into the walls, connecting him directly to the ship's systems. His face was a mix of flesh and metal, with eyes that burned like stars. "A human," Vextar said, his voice echoing from every surface in the chamber. "How amusing. You have come so far just to die in my presence." "I've come to stop you," Deho replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Vextar laughed, and the sound made the entire ship vibrate. "Stop me? I am eternal, human. I have consumed 1,000 worlds and absorbed the life force of billions of beings. What can one small creature like you possibly do to me?" Instead of answering, Deho raised his weapon and fired. The energy beam hit Vextar in the chest and simply disappeared, absorbed by his metallic skin. "Pathetic," Vextar said. He raised one hand, and dark energy began to gather around his fingers. "Let me show you real power." The blast of energy hit Deho like a physical blow, throwing him across the chamber. He crashed into a wall hard enough to crack his ribs, but managed to roll away just as another blast scorched the metal where he had been lying. "You cannot hide from me," Vextar said, floating up from the floor. "This entire ship is my body. I can see you wherever you go." Deho ran behind one of the massive support pillars that held up the chamber's ceiling. Through his communicator, he could hear Hyejin's voice. "We're at 30% access." "Keep him busy!" The pillar exploded as Vexatar's energy blast hit it. Deho dove away from the falling debris, firing his weapon again. This time, he aimed for the cables connecting Vextar to the ship's systems. One of the cables sparked and went dark. Vextar roared in anger and pain. "You dare damage my connection to my vessel?" he snarled. "I will make you suffer for that!" Vextar's form began to change, growing larger and more monstrous. Additional arms sprouted from his torso, each one ending in claws or energy weapons. His legs fused together into a serpentine tail that allowed him to move faster through the air. The battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Daeho used his smaller size and human agility to stay ahead of Vextar's attacks, while targeting the alien commander's connections to the ship. Every cable he destroyed made Vextar weaker, but also more furious. 50% access, Kael'thon reported through the communicator. But the ship's defensive systems are starting to adapt to our intrusion. How much longer? Daeho asked, ducking behind another pillar as energy beams scorched the air around him. 5 more minutes, Wujin replied. Maybe less if we can maintain this pace. Vextar heard the communication, and his burning eyes widened in realization. You're not alone, he said. The prisoners. They're helping you. That's right, Daeho said, stepping out from behind cover. Every person you've tortured, every soul you've trapped, they're all fighting back now. Impossible, Vextar roared. They are mine. I control their every thought. You control their bodies, Daeho replied. But you never broke their spirits. Vextar's rage made him careless. He launched himself directly at Daeho, abandoning his careful tactics in favor of overwhelming force. But Daeho was ready for this. He waited until the last second, then rolled to the side and fired at the main cluster of cables behind where Vexitar had been floating. The explosion was enormous. Sparks flew everywhere as dozens of connections were severed at once. Vexitar screamed and crashed to the floor, his enlarged form beginning to shrink back to its original size. What have you done? He gasped. Those connections took centuries to grow. 70% access achieved, Hyejin announced, beginning final overload sequence. Vexitar struggled to his feet, but his movements were sluggish now. You think you've won. Even if you destroy this ship, the Kethran Empire has others. The conquest will continue. Maybe, Daeho said. But this ship dies today, and so do you. I cannot die, Vextar snarled. I am beyond death. I am... His words were cut off as the ship's lights began to flicker. Deep in the hull, something was making a rumbling sound that grew louder by the second. Core overload initiated, Mordun reported. 60 seconds until critical failure. Vextar's eyes blazed with desperate fury. If I die, I'm taking you with me. He launched one final attack, pouring all his remaining energy into a massive blast aimed directly at Daeho. But as the energy flew toward him, something unexpected happened. The air in front of Daeho shimmered, and suddenly dozens of ghostly figures appeared, forming a protective barrier. We won't let you hurt him, Wujin said, his translucent form glowing with determination. He gave us hope when we had none, Hyejin added, her ghost-like hands spread wide to block Vextar's attack. He fights for all of us, Kael'thon declared. The trapped souls had used the last of their energy to manifest themselves physically, turning their combined will into a shield that absorbed Vextar's final blast. One by one they began to fade away, but each one was smiling. Thank you, Wujin whispered as his form disappeared. We're finally free. Vexitar stared in shock at the empty air where the ghosts had been. Impossible. They were mine. They belonged to me. They never belonged to you, Daeho said. They belonged to themselves, and they chose to sacrifice themselves to stop you. The rumbling in the ship was getting louder. Daeho could feel the floor vibrating under his feet as the overload spread through the vessel's systems. 30 seconds to critical failure, came the announcement, though he wasn't sure who was speaking anymore. Most of the trapped souls had already moved on, freed by the approaching destruction of their prison. Vexitar made one last desperate attempt to reach the remaining control cables, but his damaged body couldn't move fast enough. He collapsed halfway across the chamber, his form finally beginning to age and decay as the ship's life-sustaining systems failed. This isn't possible, he whispered. I was eternal. I was... His voice faded as the ship's core finally exploded. The blast tore through every level of the massive vessel, turning the galaxy's most feared weapon into an expanding cloud of debris and energy. But in the final moments before the explosion reached the central chamber, Daeho heard something that made all the pain and sacrifice worth it. From every corner of the dying ship came the sound of voices singing, not screaming in pain or crying in despair, but singing with joy and relief. 2 million souls, finally free after centuries of torment, singing their way into whatever came next. The last thing Deho saw before the explosion claimed him was a small, translucent figure standing nearby. It was a child, maybe 8 years old, with kind eyes and a peaceful smile. "Thank you," the child said in a voice like music. "We'll remember you." Then the light claimed everything, and the Void Reaper was no more. Deho woke up in darkness. For a moment he thought he was dead, floating in whatever came after life, but then he felt pain in his ribs and tasted blood in his mouth, and he knew he was still alive. "Hello?" he called out. His voice echoed strangely, as if he was in a large space. Light began to appear around him, dim and blue-white. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he was still inside a ship, but it looked completely different from the Void Reaper he remembered. The walls were smooth and silver instead of dark and organic. The air was clean and cool instead of thick with the smell of fear and death. "You're awake," said a familiar voice. Deho turned and saw Wu Jin standing nearby, but he looked different too. Instead of the ghostly, translucent figure from before, he appeared solid and real. His clothes were clean, his face was peaceful, and there was no sign of the torment that had marked him during his imprisonment. "Wu Jin? But I thought that you had moved on?" "I did," Wu Jin replied with a smile. "We all did, but some of us chose to come back, at least for a while." Deho struggled to sit up, wincing as his injured ribs protested. "Come back where? What is this place?" "It's the ship," said another voice. Hyejin appeared from around a corner, looking as solid and healthy as Wu Jin. "Or what the ship has become. When the core exploded, it should have destroyed everything. But something unexpected happened. Kael'thon's tall blue form emerged from the shadows. The combined will of 2 million souls, all focused on the same goal, created something new. Instead of simply dying, the ship was transformed. Transformed into what? Deho asked. "A memorial," said Mordun, his massive gray form filling the corridor. "A living monument to all those who died fighting against tyranny. But more than that, it's become a guardian." Deho looked around at the clean, peaceful interior of the vessel. "I don't understand." "When we were freed from our torment," Wu Jin explained, "we had a choice. We could pass on to whatever comes next, or we could remain to help others. Many chose to leave, and we bless them for that choice. But some of us decided to stay. Stay and do what?" Hyejin stepped forward. "Protect the galaxy. Use the ship's power for good instead of evil. The vessel still exists, but now it serves life instead of feeding on death." "But Vextar is dead," Deho said. "The Void Reaper is destroyed." "Vextar is gone," Kael'thon confirmed. His consciousness was completely destroyed in the explosion, but the ship's basic structure survived, transformed by our collective will. It's no longer a weapon of conquest. It's a defender of the innocent. Mordun nodded. "We've become its crew, freely chosen instead of enslaved. We can help planets, defend themselves against other threats. We can rescue people from dangers they cannot face alone. And we want you to be our captain," Wu Jin said. Deho stared at them in shock. "Me? But I'm just one human. You're talking about beings from dozens of different species, with knowledge and experience I could never match." "That's exactly why. We need you," Hyejin replied. "You're not like us. You're still alive, still connected to the living galaxy. We exist between life and death now, and we need someone who can help us remember what it means to truly live. Besides," Kael'thon added, "you're the one who saved us. You could have tried to destroy the ship from outside like everyone else did. Instead, you came inside, found us, and gave us hope. You treated us like people instead of just casualties of war." Deho stood up slowly, still trying to process what they were telling him. "What about my crew, my ship?" "They're safe," Mordun assured him. "We rescued them when the Void Reaper exploded. They're on a nearby planet waiting for word from you." "We've already contacted them," Wu Jin said. "They know you're alive. But the choice of what to do next is yours." Deho walked to what looked like a window and peered outside. Instead of the dark emptiness of space, he saw something that took his breath away. They were in orbit around a planet, but the view was filled with hundreds of small lights. Ships, Rescue vessels from dozens of different species, all working together to help survivors from the battles against the Void Reaper. The galaxy heard what happened, Hyejin explained, joining him at the window. Word spread that the Void Reaper had finally been destroyed, and people came from everywhere to help with rescue operations. It's the largest cooperative effort in galactic history. Look there, Kael'thon said, pointing to a section of space near the planet. Do you see that ship with a blue hull? Daeho looked and saw a familiar vessel. That's the Whisper, my ship. So Min has been coordinating rescue efforts for 3 days, Wu Jin said. She's saved over 1,000 people so far. She's become quite the hero. Despite everything, Daeho smiled. So Min had always been capable of great things. He was proud that she was using her abilities to help others. There's something else you should know, Mordoon said, his voice becoming serious. The explosion of the Void Reaper sent a message across the galaxy. Not just that the ship was destroyed, but how it was destroyed. People know that the trapped souls fought back, that they chose to sacrifice themselves for freedom. It's given hope to oppressed people everywhere, Hyejin added. Resistance movements are forming on worlds that have been under Kethran control for decades. The Empire's reign of terror is beginning to crumble. Daeho felt a mix of pride and sadness. All those people who died, at least their deaths meant something. Their deaths meant everything, Wu Jin said firmly. But so does your life. That's why we need you to lead us. The galaxy is changing, and it needs protectors who understand the value of life. Daeho looked around at the faces of his unlikely crew. These beings had suffered unimaginable torment, yet they had chosen to use their experience to help others rather than seek revenge. They represented the best of what the galaxy could be. Different species working together for the common good. What would we do exactly? He asked. How do we protect the galaxy? However we're needed, Mordoon replied. Some worlds will need military assistance against remaining Kethran forces. Others will need help with reconstruction. Some might just need to know that someone cares about their survival. We have the power of the old Void Reaper, Kael'thon explained, but we've changed how it works. Instead of feeding on death and fear, it draws energy from hope and cooperation. The more we help others, the stronger we become. And we're not the only ones, Hyejin said excitedly. Remember Sujin, the child whose consciousness helped stabilize the transformation? She's become something special. As if summoned by her name, a small figure appeared in the corridor. It was the child Daeho had seen in his final moments aboard the old ship. But now she looked more solid, more real. Her eyes held wisdom far beyond her apparent age. Hello, Captain Daeho, Sujin said, her voice carrying the musical quality he remembered. I've been waiting to thank you properly. Thank me. You're the one who helped save everyone. Sujin shook her head. I could only help because you showed us that it was possible to fight back. You gave us courage. What are you now? Daeho asked gently. Are you like the others? I'm something new, Sujin replied. My consciousness wasn't damaged like the adults were. When the ship transformed, I became its heart. Not controlling it, but helping it remember what it means to be good. She's our moral compass, Wu Jin explained. When we're unsure about a decision, we ask ourselves what Sujin would do. Her innocence keeps us focused on what really matters. Daeho knelt down so he was at eye level with the child. Are you happy here? I'm happy helping people, Sujin said, and I think I would be even happier if you decided to stay with us. Daeho looked around at all of them. Wu Jin with his engineer's practical wisdom, Hyejin with her scientist's curiosity, Kael'thon with his physicist's understanding of the universe, Mordoon with his strategist's knowledge of conflict, and Sujin with her pure heart. They represented the best of their species, united by suffering but driven by hope. I have one condition, Daeho said finally. Name it, Mordoon replied. My crew comes with us. I won't abandon the people who trusted me. Of course, Hyejin said with a smile. We would never ask you to leave them behind. This ship is large enough for all of them, and we could use their skills. So Min would make an excellent first officer, Wu Jin added. And your other crew members have talents that would be valuable in our mission. Deho stood up and looked out the window again at the rescue ships working tirelessly to help survivors. The galaxy was healing, but it would need protectors to make sure the healing continued. "All right," he said. "I'll do it. We'll do it together." The transformed ship hummed with what sounded almost like contentment. Through its hull, Deho could feel the presence of millions of grateful souls who had finally found peace, but he could also sense something else: determination. These beings had been given a second chance, and they intended to use it wisely. "What do we call ourselves?" Deho asked. "We can't very well go around calling this thing the Void Reaper anymore." Sujin spoke up, her young voice clear and certain. "We're the Remembrance. We remember everyone who fought against evil, and we make sure their sacrifice has meaning." Daho nodded. The name felt right. They were no longer a weapon of destruction, but a living memorial that protected instead of consumed. "Captain of the Remembrance," he said, testing how it sounded. "I think I can get used to." 6 months later, the Remembrance hung in space above the world of Kepler Prime, where the first Kethran attacks had begun 3 years earlier. The planet's surface still bore scars from the invasion, but new cities were rising from the ruins, and the orbital shipyards were busy building vessels for the new Galactic Defense Alliance. Captain Deho stood on the bridge of his transformed ship, watching the construction through the main viewer. Beside him, So-Min checked reports on her datapad, coordinating the arrival of supply convoys from 17 different star systems. "The Centauri delegation will arrive in 4 hours," she reported. "They're bringing the new shield generators for the outer colonies." "Good," Deho replied. "What about the Rigelian medical teams?" "Already in position on 12 worlds. Haiyujin's recommendations for treating Kethran bioweapon exposure have been incredibly effective." Deho smiled. In the months since the Void Reaper's transformation, the crew of the Remembrance had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Not as conquerors or destroyers, but as healers and protectors. They had helped liberate 6 worlds from remaining Kethran forces, delivered medical supplies to refugee camps, and even mediated peace negotiations between species that had been enemies for centuries. "Captain," came Wu Jin's voice from the engineering station. Unlike the other transformed souls, he had chosen to take a physical form most of the time, using the ship's matter reconstruction systems to give himself a solid body. "I'm detecting a distress signal from the Vega system. Long-range sensors show signs of a battle." Deho turned to face him. "Kethran forces?" "Unknown," Wu Jin replied. "But the energy signatures are consistent with their weapons." "Plot a course for Vega," Deho ordered. "Maximum speed." As the Remembrance changed course, its hull began to glow with the soft blue light that had replaced the dark energy of its previous incarnation. The ship was powered by the combined will of its crew, both living and transformed, and that will was focused on protecting the innocent. "Estimated time to arrival, 15 minutes, reported Taemin from the navigation station. He had adapted quickly to working alongside the ship's ghostly crew members, though he still jumped sometimes when Kael Thon appeared suddenly at his shoulder to offer advice. "Signal all crew to battle stations," Deho commanded. "But remember, we defend. We don't destroy unless there's no other choice." The transformation of the Void Reaper had given them incredible power, but the crew had agreed to use that power responsibly. They could disable enemy ships without killing their crews, create defensive barriers to protect civilians, and even heal damage done by other weapons. They were no longer dealers of death, but guardians of life. When they arrived at the Vega system, they found a Kethran battle group attacking a convoy of refugee ships. 3 enemy vessels, smaller than the old Void Reaper but still dangerous, were trying to capture the fleeing civilians. "Hail the Kethran ships," Deho ordered. "Channel open," So-Min reported. "Kethran vessels, this is Captain Deho of the Remembrance. You will cease your attack on civilian ships and withdraw from this system immediately." The reply came quickly, filled with hatred and disbelief. "Impossible! The Void Reaper was destroyed! You cannot be—" "The Void Reaper is gone," Deho interrupted. "We are something new. Last warning, withdraw or face the consequences. You think you can threaten us with that ghost ship? We serve the Kethran Empire. We do not retreat." The enemy ships opened fire, their dark energy weapons lashing out at the Remembrance. But when the attacks hit the transformed vessel, something amazing happened. Instead of being absorbed or causing damage, the energy was converted into something else entirely. The ship's hull glowed brighter, and waves of healing energy spread out toward the damaged refugee ships. Morden, implement containment protocol, Deho commanded. With pleasure, Captain, came the former strategist's voice from the tactical station. The Remembrance moved with fluid grace, no longer the clumsy predator it had been under Vextar's control. Instead of attacking the Kethrin ships directly, it projected fields of energy that simply stopped their weapons from functioning. One by one, the enemy vessels found themselves helpless, unable to fire or even maneuver. "What have you done to us?" demanded the lead Kethrin commander. "We've given you a choice," Deho replied calmly. "You can surrender and be treated as prisoners of war, or you can try to fight and remain helpless until your life support fails. The Kethrin Empire does not surrender." "Then you'll die for nothing," Deho said sadly. "But your crews don't have to die with you." He opened a general channel to all 3 ships. "Attention Kethrin personnel. Your commanders have chosen death over surrender. But you have a choice. We will transport anyone who wants to live to safety. You'll be prisoners, but you'll be treated fairly according to galactic law." For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the first life sign vanished from the enemy ships, appearing moments later in the Remembrance's holding areas. Then another. Within an hour, nearly half the Kethrin crews had chosen life over pointless death. The remaining officers, loyal to their empire's twisted ideals, chose to die rather than surrender. Deho watched their ship's life support systems fail with sadness rather than satisfaction. Every death, even that of an enemy, diminished the galaxy a little. "Begin rescue operations for the refugee convoy," he ordered. "And prepare medical teams for the Kethrin prisoners. They're scared and confused, but they're still people." "Already on it," reported Hyojin, her ghostly form shimmering as she coordinated with the ship's medical systems. "Some of them are injured, but nothing we can't handle." As the Remembrance began its humanitarian work, Deho felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down to see Su-Jin standing beside him, her young face serious. "You're sad about the ones who died," she observed. "Yes," Deho admitted. "Even though they were enemies, they were still people. They could have chosen differently." "That's what makes you a good captain," Su-Jin said. "You remember that everyone matters, even the bad ones." Over the following hours, the Remembrance and its crew worked tirelessly to help the refugee convoy. Damaged ships were repaired, injured people were healed, and supplies were distributed to those in need. The former enemies were treated with the same care as everyone else, and several of them began to question the propaganda they had been taught about other species. "Captain," Somin said as they prepared to leave the system, "we're receiving a message from the Galactic Council. They want to formally recognize the Remembrance as an official peacekeeping vessel." Deho considered this for a moment. Official recognition would give them more authority to help people, but it would also mean following regulations and reporting to bureaucrats. "Tell them we appreciate the offer," he said finally, "but we prefer to operate independently. We'll cooperate with them when needed, but we won't be bound by politics." "The Council won't like that," Somin warned. "The Council will accept it," Mordoon's voice said confidently. "They need us more than we need them. Word of what we've accomplished has spread throughout the galaxy. We've become a symbol of hope for the oppressed and a warning to tyrants." As if to prove his point, communications began arriving from dozens of different worlds. Requests for help, offers of supplies, messages of gratitude from people they had rescued. The Remembrance had become exactly what its crew had hoped, a force for good in a galaxy that desperately needed hope. "Set course for the Outer Rim," Deho ordered. "I'm receiving reports of pirate activity near the trade routes." "Yes, sir," Taemin replied. "ETA 6 hours." As the ship turned toward its next mission, Deho walked through its corridors, checking on his unique crew. In engineering, Wu Jin was working with 3 human technicians to improve the ship's defensive systems. In the science lab, Hyejin was analyzing samples from newly discovered worlds, looking for signs of life. In the tactical center, Mordoon was studying star charts with Somin, planning their most efficient route to help as many people as possible. And in the ship's heart, where the old Void Reaper's torture chambers had once been, Sujin sat in a garden of growing plants from 100 different worlds. She tended them carefully, making sure each species had what it needed to thrive. It was a perfect metaphor for what they were all trying to do: help life flourish, instead of destroying it. "Captain," Kael'thon's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, "I've been analyzing our power consumption over the past month. The ship is actually getting stronger." "How is that possible?" Deho asked. "Every time we help someone, every act of kindness and protection, it feeds energy back into the ship's systems. The old Void Reaper fed on fear and pain. The Remembrance feeds on hope and gratitude." Deho smiled. It made perfect sense. The ship had been transformed by the collective will of 2 million souls who chose love over hatred, cooperation over conquest. Now it continued to grow stronger through the same principles. "Good," he said. "We're going to need all the strength we can get. There are a lot of people out there who need our help." As the Remembrance traveled toward its next mission, its hull glowed with gentle light that could be seen across vast distances. To some, it was a beacon of hope. To others, it was a warning that evil would not go unchallenged. But to everyone who saw it, it was proof that even the darkest weapons could be Tron.